Thank you. Please be seated.
Yeah, all right. You
told me yesterday, put me in mind of one of the small. All right, thank you. We're back on the record. I'm sorry I was late. I know it's an age-old excuse, but I was literally stuck in traffic. Mr. D'Angelo, do you have any continued cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
And you remain on the road.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, the parties have agreed to substitute a better copy of the timeline marked as a joint exhibit.
That's fine by me. Preferable, actually.
So, what was our exhibit number? Yes, we'll withdraw Defendant's Exhibit L, our timeline, and we'll have a stipulation that Joint Exhibit 1 may be received.
All right, so the written record should reflect, though, that Exhibit L discussed with this witness yesterday is actually going to come into evidence as Joint Exhibit 1. It's a timeline of radio traffic. So here's another one we can actually get into evidence at this point. Are both parties proffering this into evidence at this point? I'll ask the plaintiff first, Mr. Bell.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. D'Angelo?
Yes, Your Honor. Well, Mr. Bell advises that he wants to check a few things on this exhibit, and then once he confirms the accuracy, he'll come up with a color replacement copy. Correct.
Well, that's fine, but here, since it's been proffered by both and objected to by none, it'll be admitted as Joint Exhibit 1 at this moment. And then when it comes time, when this case is done and deliberations are about to begin, I trust you'll have the exact thing you want me to see.
Yes, Your Honor. May I approach?
Sure.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Sure.
Agent Soraya, good morning.
Good morning.
I believe one of the matters that you testified to yesterday was a study by Force Science headed by William Lewinsky, Dr. Lewinsky, about shell casing ejection patterns. I want to show you a study that's marked as Defendant's Exhibit M and ask you to take a look at that. And I'll ask if that is the study that you were referring to.
Yes, sir. Dated November of 2010.
If we could just look at that for a minute, turning your attention to page 3, you identified a number of variables that are taken into account to explain the variety of ejection patterns that are found, correct?
Yes, sir.
And one of them is firearm condition, correct?
Yes, sir.
The mechanism of the ejector and its condition, correct?
Yes, sir.
Wear, correct?
Yes, sir.
Whether there's any damage to the weapon, correct?
Yes, sir.
Alignment?
Yes, sir.
And continuing down there, other elements of the reconstruction, such as the grip, correct?
Yes, sir.
Weapon manipulation, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then there also, in the next paragraph, there's referenced human factors, correct?
Yes, sir.
Such as the shooter's grip on the weapon, whether it's light or tight.
Yes, a firm grip.
And also, I think you testified that the way the weapon is being held in the position it's in when it fires.
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And the third paragraph there talks about the second line, that the study demonstrated that even when done in a controlled environment with several variables accounted for, the ejection pattern of spent cartridge cases remains trendable at best, correct?
Yes, sir.
Even when, and the latter part of that paragraph, even when these factors remain constant, significant variability, and in some cases dramatic variability, has been found in the landings of the spent cartridge cases, correct?
Yes, sir.
Agent Soraya, if you could take a look at page 7 of that report through page 13. Does the report demonstrate on those pages 11 different shooting positions that a shooter can have and evidently was used in this study?
Yes, sir. The pages you mentioned, 8 through 13, illustrate different grips and apparent shooting positions utilized in the study.
Okay. And then if you could turn to page 14, Agent Soraya, where it has results, it states that the results of this study demonstrate how unpredictable spent cartridge casing ejection patterns are, even when many variables are controlled, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in this case, they fired 7,670 bullets from 8 different firearms, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the next several pages has the various statistical analyses that were done, correct?
Yes, sir.
If you look at page 20, in the text right below table 2, the second line, does the study find that changing the firearm position, as in this condition, dramatically changed the spent casing, cartridge casing patterns?
Yes, sir, you're quoting that.
Yeah.
Position drastically changed the spent cartridge casing pattern.
And on page 24, it provides that movement of the firearm during firing created a very different pattern of spent cartridge casings, correct?
Yes, sir.
And if you turn to page 31, there's a conclusion there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you agree with this conclusion that, as the study has shown, factors previously listed, including firearm design, firearm condition, ammunition type, position firearm is held when fired, movement of the firearm, and person during firing, and grip factors such as how, where, and how tightly the firearm is held during firing can affect the locations of spent cartridge casings?
Yes, sir.
That's one of the findings?
Yes, sir, it is.
And that this study illustrates that even when accounting for the above factors, significant variability occurred in the landing locations of spent cartridge casings, correct?
Yes, sir.
This variability must be considered before efforts are made to establish the location of a shooter based solely on the location of even an undisturbed spent cartridge casing or a group of cartridge casings, correct?
Yes, sir.
Agent Soraya, are you familiar that in this case, I think it may have been in October of 2014, BCI was requested to perform some measurements as to where cartridge casings were found relative to the identified 13 shooter locations?
No, sir.
Okay. Agent Soraya, we don't have the I guess the individual police officer's position here anymore. think there were some cars that aren't out there anymore. But would it be an accurate statement that your investigation revealed that these events started around Ontario and St. Clair by the Cleveland Police Headquarters, correct?
Yes, sir. That's where the pursuit initiated.
And that's where Officers Nan and Almeida were. The Malibu comes by. They identified what they thought were a shot fired in their direction, correct?
Yes, sir.
There was cooperation of that by workers in the area, including Cleveland police officers working in the sex crimes unit and homicide unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think we heard testimony the other day from Detective Diaz from the homicide unit. He interviewed the lady institutional guard that was working right there, and she also heard with a loud noise, thought it was a gunshot, and also ducked down and moved, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the pursuit continued. I think the judge asked the question, I think it was something like 22 miles.
I believe so.
Tape, right?
Yes, sir.
And it went through the 2nd district, maybe touching the 1st district, back through the 2nd, the 3rd district, I don't know if it touched the 4th and all, but it wound up in the 5th district, and then ultimately into East Cleveland, right?
Yes, sir.
And there were, I think there's record evidence, but hundreds of intersections and red lights that the pursuit went through. Many of them contrary to the red lights and the stop signs, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that the speeds at the times got over 100 miles an hour on the freeway, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, from your experience, this would be probably an unprecedented experience that you've ever encountered, correct? In terms of the length of the pursuit.
This one was longer than most. Yes, sir.
But have you seen any that have lasted more than, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes?
Yes, sir. I have a long time ago.
Okay. And there were various radio broadcasts throughout this pursuit that were to the effect that the occupants were alleged to have been seen with a firearm or pointing and gesturing as if they had a firearm directed at the police, correct?
Yes, sir.
And they were taking evasive action when officers tried to light them up with the spotlight. They would like duck in the car so that they couldn't be detected as to, if they had something in their hands, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that officers were driving erratically out of fear that they didn't want to be directly in the line of fire of anyone in that Malibu who may shoot at them, correct?
Yes, sir.
And some of that's reflected in radio broadcast communication, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a number of officers responded. I think you said at one time maybe around 62 Cleveland police vehicles.
I believe it was that high, yes, sir.
And you testified about the number of jurisdictions, potentially RTA, the Sheriff's Department, Highway Patrol, a large number of Cleveland police cars, 2 Bratnell cars, correct?
Yes, sir.
I think there was also the city of East Cleveland. I don't think East Cleveland was mentioned, but they were involved in this too, aren't they?
I don't know if they got involved in it or not.
You recall any video, and I think from statements of officers, that they were going up Wymore, there was an East Cleveland car that went flying by that almost hit the cars going up Wymore?
I don't recall that.
Now, as a police officer, over and above the specific broadcasts that are heard, would another factor that would enter into your mind about the dangers involved here be the fact that the suspects in that vehicle are fleeing a large number of police cars with lights and sirens, and doing so over an extended period of time? Would that lend anything in your mind to the seriousness of what's going on?
It would be something to be considered, yes, sir.
Right. I mean, would you wonder, why are they running so hard and for so long?
Yes, sir.
And would that make you concerned for your safety?
I believe the longer you'd be in the pursuit, the more concerned you would be.
And in your experience, and as a police officer and also as an investigator, you're familiar with CAD reports, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Did you look at the CAD reports in this case?
I don't believe I did.
Just can you give us a brief understanding as to what is a CAD?
The CAD is the computer-aided dispatch. That is the radio log. The dispatcher notes, similar to the court report or the radio transmissions command, to create a memorialized log of what is being said.
And our CAD reports something that's used throughout law enforcement throughout the country?
Yes, sir.
I want to show you Defendant's Exhibit A. Can I ask you if you can identify that?
Yes, sir.
Is that the CAD that reflects the computer broadcast for radio dispatch in this case?
Yes, sir. This appears to be a continuous log input by a variety of dispatchers on 11/29 of 12.
And it contains the date and the times of the broadcast and a statement of what was broadcast, correct?
Yes, sir. Identifies the unit calling in, whether it was, I believe this is, if I'm reading the shorthand right, received or transmitted, what was being said, and I believe it also tags who the operator is, who the dispatcher is inputting the information.
So in this case, that's a document that's created and maintained by the City of Cleveland Division of Police, correct?
This particular one, yes, sir.
I mean, that's not something that the police union created, correct?
No, sir.
Okay, so that's an official business record of the City of Cleveland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, to take you back to the pursuit agent, Sarai, the pursuit at one time, when they get off I-90, they wind up ultimately coming to a location on Euclid Avenue, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there was a Happy's Pizza place where there were certain activities, correct?
Yes, sir.
And when the pursuit got to Happy's Pizza, Mr. Russell, the driver of the Malibu, wound up going over the sidewalk and going into the Happy's Pizza lot in an effort to get away from the police as they're driving down Euclid, correct?
Yes, sir.
And there was like a side street that was next to the Happy's Pizza location.
Yes, sir.
And evidently Mr. Russell was going to take some action to ditch the police and wound up going over a sidewalk, and he was blocked out by other zone cars, correct?
I believe so.
So he couldn't go up that side street, and he couldn't make it to the back of Happy's Pizza, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so what he did was he then drove over the sidewalk, past the intersection, onto the sidewalk, right past the intersection, and got back on Euclid and continued fleeing, correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
And the police cars followed, correct?
Yes.
The events of that night speak for themselves, and the various people can have their positions as to what's depicted in terms of the pursuit. But it's factual, is it not, that there are a great number of police cars that are pursuing this Malibu with lights and sirens, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's also a fact, is it not, that there were no motor vehicle accidents involving the public throughout the course of this pursuit from Cleveland's west side all the way out to East Cleveland.
That is correct.
And throughout the pursuit from Cleveland and its various districts and streets onto Euclid Avenue. You can see when you view the video footage that your task force obtained, you see a number of police cars that in fact did block off intersections to protect the motoring public, correct?
Yes, sir, on Euclid Avenue.
And I think in the statements of other officers that may have even occurred in Cleveland around, I think, when they went up St. Clair in some portions. But again, that if it occurred, you'd expect to find that if there's any footage or in the statements of officers, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gutierrez pointed out that from looking at the video we saw yesterday, and this question to you, that some of the cars at some point did not have their lights on, correct?
Yes, sir.
Would it be an accurate statement that those cars were the ones that were way at the end of the pursuit, not the lead cars?
As I recall from the video, that was later on in the pursuit, yes, sir.
Right. And that they were the cars way at the end, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, some of the cars that had their lights on that may have blocked off an intersection after the pursuit cleared, when they re-engaged, some of them shut their lights off, right?
Yes, sir.
But the cars that were the first ones coming up Limemore and then leading into the driveway here, they had their lights and sirens on, correct?
Best of my knowledge, yes, sir.
So the pursuit winds up going up Limemore, and it comes into the driveway here by the Heritage Middle School, correct?
Yes.
And there's record evidence in this case and investigative interviews where many of the officers, they didn't know where they were at, right?
Yes.
They didn't know that they were in East Cleveland.
That's correct.
And some of them, the 2nd District officers, work on Cleveland's west side, correct?
Yes, sir.
So many of them didn't know the location because it was on the east side as well, and they hadn't worked in that area, let's say in the 5th District, correct?
Yes, sir.
So the procession of vehicles pulls into the driveway. Mr. Russell is proceeding in the opposite directions to where you're seated, and he winds up coming into the back area here where the school is, where evidently he must have discovered that there's no way out here, correct?
Yes, sir.
So from your investigation, does he stop there and give up?
No, he did not.
So, in spite of leading the police on this pursuit for over 20-some minutes with all these police cars and all these lights and sirens, he flips his car around and tries to get away, correct?
He ends up turned around, yes, sir.
He takes some driving maneuver to try to go back out the other way and get away, correct?
Yes.
And there also is record evidence that he's done this before in another jurisdiction on the east side, correct? And I think it was Willowick, went to Willowick and Willoughby and wound up in Manor.
Yes, sir.
It wasn't too long, a year or so before this incident.
I believe that'd be about right, yeah.
Okay. And when he's in the back parking lot, he turns around and he winds up coming over this island here that I'm pointing to. I guess it's the island farthest away from the school, correct?
Yes, sir.
So in terms of your reporting, is this the first island, or is the first island the one closest to the school?
I don't recall how that was referenced in the variety of reports.
So he goes over the island, and there's physical evidence to support and corroborate the fact that he did in fact go over the island, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's in the form of tire marks embedded in the grass inside the curved area of the island, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then he goes over the island in his effort to flee, and there's skid marks that are left on the curb, correct?
Yes, sir.
Were there any skid marks on the pavement there too?
I don't recall any.
Okay. And that's where he encounters Officer Diaz, right?
He encountered him just prior to the event there at the island.
Okay. And there's shell cases that were recovered in that general area that matched Officer Diaz, correct?
Yes, sir.
And other than the events that occurred down at the corner of Ontario and St. Clair by police headquarters when Officer Mann made the broadcast about he was a round was fired in his direction. This is the next time where we hear reported shots fired, correct?
Yes, sir.
And from your investigation, it was determined that Diaz was approximately 5 feet away from Mr. Russell's car when he shot his rounds, correct? Objection.
Oh,
I know he was in close proximity. I don't know if we ever determined 5 feet or not.
Do you have any approximate range, given where the casings were and the tire marks?
Off the top of my head right now, no, sir.
Would it be a reasonable and fair characterization that he was in close proximity to the driver's front window at some point?
As I recall, he was in close proximity, yes, sir.
And he said so in his statement, right?
Yes, sir.
And he fired 4 shots, right?
He believed it was 4.
And as I think you found in this case, not only with Officer Brelo, but all the officers were wrong in their estimates as to the number of shots fired, correct? There may have been 1 or 2 exceptions that had it right.
For the most part, yes, sir.
Right. I mean, Box remembered that he fired a shotgun at one time. He may have thought he fired more than once.
objection. Sustained.
Ron, I think the state opened the door to this yesterday when they elicited testimony, hearsay testimony about, I think about 9 or 10 officers stated where they were positioned throughout this. I simply objected when they were trying to link an exact shooting position, but prior to that they opened the door and got into this.
Well, the question I just heard, the objection is sustained. Let's hear the next question.
But you would agree that it's a fair characterization that the great majority of police officers who fired their weapons were incorrect in their assessment as to how many rounds that they had fired, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's not unusual, is it?
No, sir.
In fact, in many of your investigations and from your studies involving the Force Science Institute and others, these are very high stressful encounters, correct?
Yes, sir, they are.
And things are rapidly evolving in dangerous settings, correct?
Yes, sir.
There's gunfire, and when we say lives are on the line, that's not some trite expression, that's reality, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And so in that atmosphere, it's reasonable that officers can be off in their estimates as to how many shots they fired, correct?
Yes, sir.
And it's also reasonable in that kind of setting that there's perceptual distortions that occur on the part of officers, correct?
Clarify your...
Well, the studies, is there a term called perceptual distortions that's involved in these types of critical incidents?
There are distortions in as much as what has been characterized as tunnel vision and I can't think of the proper term for it. Time seems to slow down for some people, things like that, yes, sir.
Okay, so in this case, though, we've seen both extremes. Time slows down for some, but then others, the time seemed like it went on forever, correct?
Yes.
So those are the time distortions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Not fabrications, correct?
That is correct.
And there is a real term that's called tunnel vision. It's not something that's just dreamt up or made up by some person trying to escape review of his or her actions, correct?
That is correct.
So what's tunnel vision?
It has been characterized that in the flight or fight reaction of a human, the eye muscles will refocus the eye to what is exactly in front of them, where the threat is. When that occurs, peripheral vision diminishes, and the field of vision going from being very wide can become very narrow. Hence, in firearms training, we instruct officers scan to physically turn their heads to look left and right to break the tunnel vision.
But in terms of reality at times, have you found that in critical incidents where gunfire is going on and officers are facing a threat and they're trying to neutralize the threat, that's where their focus is? Sometimes they're not scanning around. They're looking where they're firing, correct?
They will be looking. That's why in the training scenarios, we after every cycle, rounds are fired, breathe, scan. And we try to indoctrinate that into training. Under stressful situations, most people fall back to their training.
But some, as Officer Eric said, I think in his interview, he was scared shitless, right?
Yes, sir.
And a lot of other officers thought that they were going to get hit by a bullet, right?
Yes, sir.
So if an officer in that circumstance just kept firing, was focused on target, and wasn't scanning, would you view that officer as someone that's off the reservation? Objection?
Oh,
Not necessarily.
And in this case, Agent Sarai, and in your interviews, it's true, is it not, that many officers exhibited emotions during their interviews?
Yes, sir.
Many of them were crying.
Yes, sir.
Officer Diaz was crying.
Yes.
Officer Rink was teared up.
I believe so.
The old-timer Demchek was pounding the table at one point. He wells with tears.
Yes, sir.
Guy with a ponytail. Sergeant Coleman was crying.
Yes, sir.
She was in the fetal position on the floorboard in her car, and she and her partner determined that they had to get out of the car, and they counted to 3 and bailed out somehow. Objection.
sustained.
Yes.
Well, did you learn that from her interview? Objection.
Right, this sounds like it's something that you're offering for the truth of the matter. It's a statement apparently that she made to him, so it is indeed yours.
But you observed her crying in her interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
She's a 20-some-year veteran in charge of the 2nd District Vice Unit, correct?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Officer Farley, another veteran, he cried in his interview too, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
And he was barely audible at times, correct?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall him saying at the end of his interview as he was quivering that he didn't know if he wanted to be a policeman anymore? Objection.
Well, I don't think it's offered for the truth of the statement. In other words, whether he really does or doesn't want to be an officer. I think it's offered to elicit this witness's observations about the the statementizer's state of mind. So that objection is overruled.
Yes, he did.
You were touched during those interviews, weren't you? Although you were independent and you maintained a very professional demeanor, it got to you too, didn't it, to listen to all that?
Yes, sir.
It got to me, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
Brelo was crying, wasn't
Yes, sir.
it? Almost uncontrollably, right? Objection.
Overruled.
You observed it.
He was crying, yes, sir.
You had to ask him 4 times, didn't you, during his interview? Are you okay? You want to take a break while he was crying?
I believe that,
I got the times marked.
Hey,
Did you recall it?
I remember telling him to calm down a couple times, yes.
And he drank 3 bottles of water, right?
I thought it was 2.
2, but he refilled and came back after he went to the bathroom.
Okay.
But would it be a fair statement that based on his demeanor, he was really shook up when he was being interviewed?
Yes, sir.
And at your suggestion, you inquired of him whether he wanted to have a break, correct?
Yes, sir.
tears and sniffling as that dialogue was occurring, correct?
I believe so.
Officer Sobolik had tears too, didn't he?
I believe he did.
Officer Hummel did too, didn't he?
I don't recall.
Officer Box did, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
Within, from the date of the incident to the time of his interview, I think within 3 days or so, he lost 15 pounds, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did he indicate that he lost 15 pounds in his interview?
Objection.
Sustained.
Agent Soraya, so Mr. Russell goes over the island, Diaz fires his weapon. Your investigation reveals that there's broadcast shots fired, correct?
Yes, sir.
Some officers heard it on radio, others heard it from being there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Russell then proceeds to flee in the same direction that he was pursued into the parking lot, correct?
Yes, sir.
And as he went that course, he went by other police officers on foot and also in their cars, correct?
Yes, sir.
I tried to count the number of cars during your direct testimony, but I think I counted that there were 7. And there's 7 depicted on this model. 7 cars behind Malibu's ultimate resting place, closest to the prosecution's here, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, other than Diaz's vehicle, Mr. Russell went by, as I recall, Rinkus was somewhere back there, Mateo and Racina, call those officers.
The last 2 names I don't recognize. Officer Rinkus, yes.
Officer McNeely.
I believe he was one up there as well.
Officers Cruz and Gonzalez were partners.
Yes.
Officer Gonzalez had to grab Cruz and get him back in the car so he would not be hit by Mr. Russell as he was driving out of it, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were officers indicating in their statements that they were going to fire, but they could see that they would have struck someone on the other side, so they didn't fire as this car came out of here?
Yes.
Officer Cruz, who was Officer Gonzalez's partner, also was crying when he gave his statement, wasn't he?
I did not interview him.
Do you recall a Cleveland police officer who was a victim of friendly fire in another incident on a domestic violence call where there were 12 shots fired by another police officer and he was on the other side of the wall where the shots came through?
Yes, I do.
And does that refresh your recollection that was Officer Cruz?
I believe that was.
And was Officer Cruz pounding the table and very emotional in his interview?
I did not interview him.
Were resources offered and recommended for Officer Cruz for him to deal with his issues?
I don't know if they were offered to him or not.
Did you make that recommendation throughout all these interviews?
Yes, I offered services through our victim advocate through BCI to make arrangements with you.
And that was one of the first things that you did in these interviews, correct?
Yes, sir.
You broke the ice and asked everyone how they were doing, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you told them to be macho, I forget your exact words, but you indicated that there are services available, and you should make yourself available to these services, if not through the union. DCI is going to help out if needed, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you just didn't do that because you were trying to run a little con on them and rope them in the interview. You felt that that was relevant to discuss with them, right?
Yes, sir.
So the suspect vehicles trying to get away approaches this general area, and we have your investigation reveals that this car here that I'm pointing to is 238, which is to the right of the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's where Officer Sistek and Radicevic were positioned, correct?
Yes, sir.
Radicevic was the driver, Sistek was a passenger.
Yes, sir.
So Sistek is getting out of the car because shots were fired. Everyone knew that was going on, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the Malibu that strikes that passenger door of 238, correct?
Yes, sir.
And officers were coming up in the area, and Salupo was one, and observations were in your investigation revealed that Sistek was observed to have gone down, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the thought was that the car struck Officer Sistek, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's when gunshots began to ring out from behind the Malibu at the driver to try to stop that Malibu from running over Sistek, who was perceived to be on the ground, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, did you interview Officer Salupo?
Yes, sir.
And did Officer Salupo tell you that he saw Sistek get out of his car and he had that old shit look on his face? He saw the
Objection.
Malibu bearing down on him?
Sustained.
Run out for the same reason as stated before. They opened the door to what officers said in their interviews, and that's what I'm trying to elicit.
I don't recall that. Had an objection been lodged, I certainly would have sustained.
I don't want to argue with the court, just by way of comparison with Mr. Shaughnessy's examination of the East Cleveland detective, I believe this is a similar situation. I would do it in summary fashion.
Well, you've already done it in summary fashion. You haven't drawn objections, but now you're asking, did a specific witness tell you a specific thing? And it seems to me that you're offering that witness's specific observation for the truth of the matter. In other words, to get it in as substantive evidence.
Very well, Your Honor. Agent Soraya, would it be a fair statement, though, that as the Malibu was attempting to flee the parking lot, it struck the passenger car 238?
Yes, sir.
And that's where Officer Sistek was, and he got out of that car, correct?
Yes, sir.
Gunshots started coming from behind 238, correct?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, gunshots start bringing out from behind the Malibu.
I don't think we ever determined at that point where the shots started from first.
Okay. Then, would it be a fair statement that multiple officers began to fire from multiple locations?
Yes, sir.
So, your investigation reveals that there were shell casings found throughout the general area, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we've already been through that and the arguments and the significance of it, but would it be a fair statement that, and your testimony was yesterday on direct, that there were shell casings found with Officer Rinkus in this case to the right rear of the Malibu, correct?
I believe it was, yes, sir.
And it's near the sidewalk area and the grassy area where I'm pointing, correct?
Somewhere in that general area, yes, sir.
And Officer Rinkus was determined to have fired there were 13 of his casings found, correct?
Without referencing reports, sir, I will take your word for it.
And he didn't have a Glock 19 or a Glock 17. He had a different Glock, right?
I don't recall.
Okay. But there were shell casings found to the right rear. Salute casings were not recovered, correct? I think you said that yesterday in your direct.
I believe that's correct, sir.
Okay. And officer, there were 4 Cleveland police cars up here yesterday, correct?
2 behind 217 and 238, one on the grass and one further up the hill towards the bus loop.
Okay. So in the grassy area here that I'm pointing to, which is to the right of 238, the driver's side, in the grassy area, there were 2 other Cleveland police cars, correct?
Maybe to the left, but yes, sir.
Okay, to the left, from my perspective. Okay. And then there were 2 other Cleveland police cars coming into the driveway area, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that would have been Officer Patrick and Dox and Officer Officer Farley and Sabola.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Do you recall their approximate position in terms of distance from, let's say, the rear of 217?
As I recall from the interviews, a car length or 2 behind them.
Okay. So you testified on direct yesterday that there's shell casings found, some in the area behind 238 that would be beyond or the direction towards you on the witness stand. Is that the north or?
There's a compass rose on the diagram.
Okay, so north's here. So what area would this be on the driveway?
Which way is indicating north on this?
Over here.
Basically east.
East.
North is pointing to the judge.
Okay.
So that would be what?
That would be
over
east,
here?
yes, sir.
East. So in this eastern direction, there are shell casings found past the area where some shell casings of Officer Brelo's were found, correct?
Yes, sir.
Right. And so we have a number of officers firing from that position directly at the Malibu, correct?
Repeat that, please.
Okay, there were a number of officers that fired. We have Sabolik and his partner, Officer Farley.
Okay.
Who fired some shots in this area back here at the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And we know that there were 4 casings found for Officer Farley. You would not disagree with that, would you?
I believe that's correct, sir.
And there were also 4 casings found of Officer Sabolik, correct?
Yes, sir.
So they fired shots in this direction. They obviously were firing at the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
There were, I think your testimony was yesterday, Officers Moore, who was Officer Brelo's partner, and Officer Patrick were firing from the passenger side of 217, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Officer Moore, 19 of her casings were found, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes, sir.
And do you recall approximately how many shots she fired through the windshield of 217?
I do not, sir.
Okay. Officer Patrick, 9 of his casings were found. Do you recall that?
That sounds about right. Yes, sir.
And that's from this area here. And your investigation determined that they were firing at the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, there's an exhibit here. You've never seen the one with the circles and the distance markers within 5 feet or everything. But would it be a pretty fair statement that, generally speaking, give or take whatever that chart will show, but we're talking, no more than a first down for the distance allowed these officers to fire, about 10 yards, 30 feet.
Yes, sir. That'd be about right.
It gets within range. Some are closer, but some are firing anywhere from 20 feet, 30 feet away. So basically 10 yards of first down. And there's a couple back here that might be a little bit farther away, maybe 40 feet, something like that. But we're not talking, firing the entire length of the football field, like 100 yards. So an officer's trying to fire his weapon or her weapon, from like 300 feet away.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is pretty close distance shooting, correct?
Yes, sir.
Agent Sarai, you testified yesterday that there were two Glock weapons that most of these officers had, the Glock 17 and the Glock 19, correct?
Yes, sir.
So Officer Brelo had a Glock 17, correct?
Yes, sir.
And from counting up the officers that had a Glock 17, Mr. Gutierrez can correct me if I'm wrong, but I count 5 officers that had a Glock 17 model, and the record evidence will be what it is. Does that sound about right to you?
I believe so, sir. Yes, sir.
And there were 6 officers that had the Glock 19. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
So that makes 11. Box had a shotgun, that makes 12. And 13 is Officer Rinkus. He had the Glock 26 model.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 different weapons that the officers who would use deadly force fired. So on the Glock 19, that's the magazine contains 15 rounds, correct?
Yes, sir. That's the compact model.
And then there's one in the chamber. Is that the right way to say it?
If it's administratively loaded, yes, sir.
Okay. So if Officer Moore, if 19 of her casings were found, and she had a Glock 19, which she did, so that means that she had to fire from more than one magazine, correct?
Yes, sir.
So she had to eject the magazine that was in the weapon once she went through her 15 or 15 plus 1 rounds, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she would have had to have been reloaded, right?
Yes, sir.
And have you discovered that the standard issue for police officers in the city of Cleveland is the magazine in your weapon plus 2 extras that you keep on your duty belt?
That is most police officers, yes, sir.
And that's required in their general police orders. They're mandated to carry that.
I didn't review those orders, but
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Sure.
Agent Sarai is showing you what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 10. It's a general police order. .3.11, and there's a tab there. You just take a look at that for a second.
yes, sir.
Agent Sarai, on page 506, under letter E, does it provide that uniformed personnel shall carry a full complement of ammunition while on duty?
Yes, sir.
And from your investigation, sir, did you find that the 13 officers that had these Glock weapons, they all had 2 extra magazines on their duty belt?
Yes, sir.
Well, 12 had Glocks, but Box, I suppose, what? He had his own Glock but didn't use it?
Yes, sir. He kept his pistol holstered and used a shotgun out of the car.
And so Officer Moore, she had to reload, and in addition to that, she was trying to get the shotgun out, have someone get the shotgun so that could be deployed, correct?
Objection.
Sustained?
Other than Officer Box, did your investigation determine that efforts were made to also put into operation another shotgun?
Yes.
Okay. And those efforts proved futile because no one wanted to get out from under cover so they wouldn't get their head blown off, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Well, did you learn during your investigation that Officer Patrick refused to retrieve the shotgun and told Officer Moore to go get it yourself?
Objection.
Sustained.
Agent Soraya, the Glock model 26 that Officer Rinkus had, that had a 10-round capacity, correct?
Yes, sir. That's their subcompact model.
And there's something called an extension grip or something like that. It's got 2 more rounds.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so at the end of his weapon, so that it has a 10-round capacity, and then there's 2 more on that extension grip, correct?
Yes, sir. It's a replaceable base plate.
Okay, and then there's also one in the $13 casings of his were found. So if there's 10 plus 2, that means he had that extra one in the, what do you call it, in the magazine? Or
In the chamber.
In the chamber. And your investigation revealed that he had secured another magazine, but didn't use it, but he put it in his gun, correct?
Yes, sir.
And he was taking cover while he was doing it, right?
Yes, sir.
There were 4 shell casings found from Officer Demchak, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Okay. And again, Demchak would have been somewhere in this area, correct? Right around the rear passenger side of 217. The general area, I think you may have it. He came from over here and positioned, and some of the shell casings are in this area.
I don't know if it was behind 217 or 238.
Okay. But he was firing at the Malibu, right?
Yes, sir.
And he was within a car length of the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Officer O'Neill, 12 of her shell casings were found, and she's coming from where they park their car, right, as soon as they come into the area in this grassy part, and they advance towards the driver's side of 238, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you find shell casings for Officer O'Donnell in the general grassy area right by the driver's side area of 238?
Yes, sir.
And you found out some of Officer Ehrig's shell casings in that general area too, correct?
Yes, sir.
And only 2 of his casings were found, but he had fired 6 times, correct?
I don't believe we found all of his. And,
whatever the number was, not all of his casings were found.
I don't believe so.
And that's not unusual in circumstances like this. I think there's been testimony explaining why. You recall that?
Yes, sir.
And so Ehrig and O'Donnell were also firing at the Malibu, correct?
Yes, sir.
From the slope area advancing towards 238 at the passenger side area, from slightly to the rear to even, or maybe a little bit past the passenger side of the Malibu.
Objection.
The general area. They certainly weren't back here by the school when they were firing, correct?
That's correct,
I
sir.
mean, the shell casing study would really be put on its head if we found they were back here and we found their casings way up here, right?
Yes,
This
sir.
is the general area, and we'll save it for arguments later, but it is what it is. So that's about 18 shots coming from O'Donnell and Eric within about a first down, right? Give or take a little bit.
Yes, sir.
And we know Officer Patrick had 9 casings, so how many other shots Officer Moore found, and we can count them up on the chart. But if we say that she fired, let's say 4, just pick a number. If you had 4 plus Patrick's 9, that would mean 13 more shots coming from the passenger area of 217 towards the Malibu within 30 feet or less. Give or take.
Overall, if I want.
Give or take, a little bit.
Yes, sir.
Judge, he's mischaracterizing the evidence at this point, Your Honor. That is not factual.
I'm not suggesting it's factual. I'm just
Then redirect it.
general. Thank you, Your Honor.
And actually, during this semi-lull, let's take a quick break so you remain under oath. We'll see you at 25 after.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.